Welcome back to Dark Horror Stories. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true disturbing stories from Chicago's darkest corners. These are tales of people who ventured into the city's forgotten spaces after dark and found something they were never meant to see. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Story 1. I'd been riding the Red Line home from my restaurant job for maybe 3 years when this happened. Always took the 2:47 a.m. train, or I think it was 2:47. Might have been 2:42. Either way, it was late enough that the cars were mostly empty except for a couple of nurses heading home and maybe someone sleeping off whatever they'd gotten into earlier that night. The vinyl seats always had this particular smell at that hour, like stale beer mixed with that industrial cleaner they use. I'd usually just put in my earbuds and zone out until my stop. That Thursday, no. Actually, it was a Friday morning, technically. I was sitting in the second car from the front. My shoes were killing me after a double shift, and I remember I'd bought a bag of Skittles from the vending machine before leaving work, even though I wasn't really hungry. Just wanted something to do with my hands. The train had that particular rattle it always got between Fullerton and Armitage, this rhythmic clunking that you'd almost stop noticing after a while. There were maybe 4 other people in my car. A woman in scrubs sitting near the front, earbuds in. 2 guys in construction gear toward the back, having a quiet conversation. And this older man in a Cubs jacket who looked like he was asleep, head against the window. Normal late-night crowd. The thing is, there's this stretch between Belmont and Addison where the train slows down near this old platform. I don't know if it was ever actually in service, or maybe it was something they started building and never finished. But you can see it for just a few seconds as you pass this dark concrete platform with those old-style green support beams, all rusted and covered in graffiti. I'd seen it hundreds of times and never thought much about it. That night, the train slowed down more than usual. Almost came to a complete stop. I looked up from my phone because the sudden change in momentum made my stomach drop a little. And that's when I saw someone standing on that abandoned platform, just standing there, perfectly still, facing the train. I told myself it was probably just a transit worker. Maybe they were doing late-night maintenance or something. But the platform was completely dark, no work lights, no equipment, nothing. And the figure was just standing there in what looked like a long coat or maybe a blanket, I couldn't tell. Their face was pale in the dim light from the train. The train lurched forward again and we passed the platform. I felt my shoulders relax a little. Probably just someone who'd gotten lost or was sleeping rough. Chicago's full of forgotten corners where people end up. Nothing weird about that. We pulled into Addison Station. The doors opened with that hydraulic hiss they always make. Nobody got off in my car. Nobody got on, except I heard footsteps on the platform. Quick, deliberate footsteps. And then someone stepped into the far end of my car. It was the same coat. The same pale face, but now I could see them clearly under the fluorescent lights, and something about the proportions was wrong. Their arms hung too long at their sides, like the coat sleeves were empty but something was still in there, pulling the fabric down. Their head tilted at this slight angle like they were studying something on the ceiling. I looked away immediately. Stared at my phone screen without really seeing it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was a different person in a similar coat. The platform had been dark after all. I was exhausted. 12-hour shifts mess with your head. The doors closed. The train started moving. I could hear those footsteps again, slow now, walking down the center aisle of the car. The woman in scrubs got up suddenly and moved to the next car through the connecting door. Didn't look back. The 2 construction guys followed her a few seconds later. I thought about going with them, but my legs felt heavy and part of me didn't want to seem paranoid. The older man in the Cubs jacket was still asleep, or I assumed he was asleep. The footsteps stopped. I could feel someone standing right next to me. I could smell something like wet concrete and rust. My mouth went completely dry. I made myself look up. They were standing in the aisle facing me. Up close, I could see that what I'd thought was a coat was actually their skin, gray and loose, hanging off their frame like it was several sizes too big. Their face was smooth and featureless except for these shallow indentations where eyes should be. No nose, no mouth, just blank stretched skin pulled tight over a skull that seemed too narrow. And their hands were hanging at their sides, and the fingers were so long they brushed the floor. Each finger had too many joints, bending in places fingers shouldn't bend. I couldn't move, I couldn't even breathe, every muscle in my body locked up. The thing's head tilted further that same curious angle, and then one of those hands lifted slowly, deliberately, and reached toward my face. I don't remember making the decision to move. I just found myself lunging out of my seat, stumbling toward the connecting door to the next car. My bag fell off my shoulder and I left it. Didn't even think about going back for it. I crashed through the door into the next car. The woman in scrubs and the two construction guys were all standing near the far end, and when they saw my face, they moved further away. Nobody said anything. I turned back to look through the window and the connecting door. The thing was still standing in the same spot, not following, just standing there with its head tilted, those impossibly long fingers hanging motionless. And then it turned and walked toward the sleeping man in the Cubs jacket. I couldn't watch what happened next. I pressed my back against the far door and closed my eyes. The train pulled into Sheridan Station. The doors opened. The woman in scrubs ran out and the construction guys followed. I should have gone with them, but I couldn't make my legs work. I just stood there shaking while the doors closed again. We rolled into Wilson. More people got on, a couple of college kids, someone in a security uniform. Normal people. The car filled up with normal Friday night energy. I waited until Loyola to go back to my car. My bag was still there on the floor. The Cubs jacket was draped over the seat where the old man had been sitting, neatly folded, but the man was gone. I moved to Rogers Park 2 months later, started taking the bus instead. And sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that abandoned platform between Belmont and Addison. I think about what might be standing there in the dark, waiting for the next train to slow down. Last week I saw a missing person poster at the grocery store. Older man, last seen wearing a Cubs jacket. I didn't read the rest of it. I don't think I want to know. Story 2. My buddy Tomas and I had this thing where we'd explore parts of the city most people forget exist. Not like breaking into abandoned buildings or anything illegal, more like finding those weird public spaces that got built in the 70s and everyone just stopped using. Chicago's full of them. Underground pedways, elevated walkways, courtyards between buildings that you can only access from specific doors. The city grows up and around itself so much that whole sections just get lost. Tomas had found this entrance to the pedway system near Washington and Dearborn. We used the pedways before during winter, cutting through buildings to avoid the cold. But this particular section was different. The entrance was down this narrow stairwell between two buildings, and the door at the bottom looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. The paint was peeling and someone had covered the window with paper from the inside. Probably closed for construction, I said. This was back in March, I think. Early March, because I remember there was still dirty snow piled up in the alleys. But Tomas tried the handle and it opened. It's city property, he said. It's not trespassing if it's technically public access. I should have said no. I was tired, we'd both been working overtime at our jobs. Some accounting thing I was doing that I honestly hated. But I wanted to feel like I was doing something interesting, you know. Something that wasn't spreadsheets and fluorescent lights. The door opened onto a long concrete corridor. The lights were on, but they were those old buzzing fluorescents that flickered just enough to make you notice. The walls were that particular shade of beige that everything built in the 80s seems to have. There were signs pointing to different buildings, Daily Plaza, City Hall, some others I didn't recognize. We walked for maybe 10 minutes. The corridor would branch off occasionally, and we'd pick a direction at random. Tomas was taking pictures with his phone, not of anything specific, just documenting that we were there. I kept thinking we'd run into a maintenance worker or security guard, but the place was completely empty. "This is weird," Tomas said. His voice echoed strangely. "Friday night, you'd think there'd be at least some people using these." I checked my phone. 11:47 p.m. Everything's probably closed up top. These pedways are mainly for office workers during the day. We turned another corner and the corridor opened up into a wider space, like a small plaza area with some concrete benches and these sad-looking planters with dead plants in them. There were 3 different corridors leading off in different directions. No signs this time. That's when we heard it. Someone calling my name. Not just my name, my full name. Marcus Bellamy, clear as day, coming from one of the corridors. Tomas looked at me. "You know someone down here?" I shook my head. My heart was starting to beat faster, but I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone from work had seen us come down. Maybe there was security monitoring the cameras and they'd looked me up somehow. Marcus Bellamy, again, same corridor. The voice was familiar in a way that made my skin crawl, but I couldn't place it. "That's weird, man," Tomas said. "Let's go back." But I was already walking toward the sound. I don't know why, it felt like I needed to know who it was. The corridor sloped downward slightly and the lights were more spread out here. Some of them were out completely. Marcus, closer now, and I finally recognized it. It was my father's voice. My father died when I was 16, lung cancer. I hadn't heard his voice in over 10 years except in old home videos. I stopped walking. Tomas grabbed my arm. "Marcus, we should go, now." But I couldn't move, because I could hear footsteps now, coming toward us from the darkness ahead. Steady, measured footsteps on concrete. "Marcus, come here. I need to show you something." That was wrong. That was the wrong thing. My father never called me Marcus. He always called me Mark. Always. I turned around and started walking fast back toward the plaza area. Tomas was right behind me. The footsteps behind us got faster. We reached the plaza and I couldn't remember which corridor we'd come from. There were 3 of them and they all looked identical. Tomas pointed at one. "That one, I think. I'm pretty sure." We ran down it. The fluorescent lights buzzed louder here, that electrical hum that sets your teeth on edge. Behind us, the footsteps echoed through the plaza. The corridor went on too long. We should have reached the main pedway by now. The walls were starting to look different too, darker, more stained. There was water dripping somewhere, that steady drip, drip, drip you get from old pipes. "Tomas," my father's voice again. But now it was behind us and ahead of us. Stereo. Tomas Ruiz. "Where are you going?" Tomas made this sound, halfway between a gasp and a sob. We kept running. And then we turned a corner and saw someone standing in the corridor ahead of us. It had my father's shape, his height, his shoulders, but the proportions were stretched somehow, like someone had described my father to an artist who'd never seen a human before. The arms were too long. The head sat wrong on the neck. It smiled at us, and the smile went up too far on the face, almost to where the ears should be. "I've been waiting," it said in my father's voice. "We've been waiting, come see." I grabbed Tomas and pulled him into a side corridor I hadn't noticed before. We ran blindly, turning corners at random, just trying to get away from that thing. My lungs burned. My phone was dead. I checked it at some point, and the screen wouldn't turn on even though it had been fully charged when we came down. I don't know how long we ran. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. And then suddenly we burst through a door and we were in the basement of some building. There were washing machines and storage cages and normal apartment building things. We found the stairs and got out to the street. We were somewhere up in the loop near Randolph, at least 8 blocks from where we'd entered the pedways. Tomas moved to Minneapolis 3 months later for a job. He says it wasn't because of that night, but we both know that's not true. We don't talk much anymore. I still work in the loop. Still walk past those pedway entrances every day. But I take the street now, even in winter, even when it's 20 below. Sometimes at night I dream I'm back in those corridors and I can hear my father's voice calling my name, but it's not my father. It's not anything that was ever human. And in the dream, I know that if I turn around, I'll see it standing right behind me. I always wake up before I turn around. There was one thing we didn't notice until later. Tomas's phone was full of pictures from that night, dozens of them that he didn't remember taking. Most of them were just shots of the corridors. But in the last picture, the one taken right before his phone died, you can see someone standing in the background. Someone in my father's old red flannel shirt, but their arms hang down past their knees. Story 3. The merchandise mart is strange at night. During the day, it's this bustling center of wholesale showrooms and design studios, people everywhere. But after 10 p.m., when the last offices close, it becomes this massive, empty labyrinth. 4 million square feet of hallways and showrooms and spaces that don't quite make sense even when you've worked there for years. I'd been doing security there for maybe 8 months. It was easy work. Mostly walk the assigned floors, check that doors are locked, make sure nobody is sleeping in the bathrooms or stairwells. The pay was decent and I liked working nights. Less people to deal with. I could listen to podcasts and just walk. My shift that night started at midnight. It was a Tuesday, I'm fairly certain. Cold outside, that November cold that cuts right through your jacket. I remember stopping at the 7-Eleven on Orleans for coffee before heading in. Got a large hazelnut because they were out of the French vanilla I usually got. Small details stick with you for some reason. The mart has this particular quality late at night. Your footsteps echo too much. The emergency exit signs cast these pools of red light that never quite reach the ceiling. And there are all these mirrors. Design showrooms are full of mirrors. So you're constantly catching glimpses of movement that's just your own reflection. You get used to it eventually. I started my rounds on the 8th floor. Checked the bathrooms, tested the locked doors to the showrooms, made my notes on the clipboard. Everything normal. The heating system was making its usual sounds, that baseline rumble of a building this size just existing. Around 1:30 a.m. I was walking through the main corridor on the 7th floor when I noticed something off. There was a showroom door that was slightly ajar. Not wide open, just cracked maybe an inch. I could see light coming from inside, which was wrong because all the showroom should be dark. I checked my clipboard. The showroom was listed as Millwork and Design Studio 7214. I checked this door 2 hours earlier and it had been locked tight. I pushed the door open wider and called out, "Security, anyone in here?" No response. The lights were on full brightness, those harsh overhead fluorescents that design studios use. The space was set up like a high-end office, leather couches, glass coffee tables, these architectural models on white pedestals. Everything looked normal. I walked through, checking the back offices and the bathroom. Empty. I was about to leave when I noticed something on one of the glass tables, a cup of coffee still steaming. I touched the side of the cup. Hot. Fresh. My mouth went dry, but I tried to stay rational. Maybe I'd missed someone during my earlier sweep. Maybe one of the designers had come back late to finish a project and I just hadn't seen them. It happens sometimes. I called out again. "Hello, I'm going to need to see some ID if you're working late." Nothing. Just that building hum and my own breathing. I turned to leave and that's when I saw the corridor outside. It was wrong. I just walked down that corridor. I knew it ended in a T-intersection about 20 feet to the left. But now, looking out through the showroom door, the corridor stretched on endlessly in both directions. No intersection. Just hallway going on and on, the emergency lights spaced too far apart, the distances all wrong. I stepped back into the showroom and pulled out my phone. Tried to call my supervisor. No signal. The phone showed full bars but wouldn't connect. When I looked back at the doorway, the corridor was normal again. The T-intersection was right there where it should be. I got out of that showroom fast, locked the door behind me, checked it twice. My hands were shaking a little, but I chalked it up to bad coffee and too many podcasts about paranormal shit. I continued my rounds, kept checking my phone every few minutes, but the signal never came back. On the 6th floor, I found another door open. This one led into a furniture showroom. Same thing, lights on, everything looking normal. But in the middle of the room, there was a chair facing away from the door. Someone was sitting in it. I could see the back of their head, dark hair, shoulders in what looked like a gray sweater, perfectly still. "Hey," I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "Building S closed, you need to leave." The person didn't move, didn't respond. I walked around to face them, my hand on my radio even though I knew it wasn't picking up signal. The chair was empty, but I had seen someone. I'd seen their head, their shoulders. I'd been looking right at them. I backed out of the room. My heart was pounding now, my breath coming too fast. The rational part of my brain was screaming that I was tired, that I was seeing things, that there had to be an explanation. But my body knew something was very wrong. I decided to head back to the security office on the ground floor. I could fill out an incident report, maybe get someone else to come check these showrooms with me. I just needed to get to the stairs. The problem was I couldn't find them. The corridor kept taking me in circles. I'd walk toward where the east stairwell should be, turn a corner and find myself back at the same elevator bank I'd started from. I tried the west stairwell. Same thing. It was like the building was rearranging itself around me. I was trying not to panic. I'd walked these floors hundreds of times. I knew the layout. This was just disorientation, maybe something wrong with my inner ear, some kind of spatial confusion. And then I turned a corner and saw myself. I was standing at the end of the hallway, maybe 30 feet away, facing me, wearing my security uniform, holding my clipboard, looking right at me. But I was here. I was in my body. That wasn't a mirror. That was something else wearing my face. The thing that looked like me tilted its head, and then it smiled. Not a human smile. The corners of its mouth pulled back too far, showing too many teeth. And then it started walking toward me. I ran. I don't know where, just away. I hit a door with my shoulder and it flew open, and I was in a stairwell finally, real stairs with concrete walls and the smell of floor wax. I went down 3 flights without stopping, crashed through the 4th floor door, ran down corridors I actually recognized. I found another stairwell and took it all the way to the ground floor, burst into the security office where my supervisor was doing paperwork. He looked up at me. "Jesus, Kowalski, you look like you've seen a ghost. You all right?" I couldn't speak for a moment, just stood there gasping. Finally, I managed. "Something's wrong with the upper floors. The doors are open and the layout isn't right, and I saw." I stopped. What had I seen? How could I explain it? Saw what? I don't know. "I think I need to go home. I don't feel well." He let me leave early, logged it as a sick day. I never went back. 2 weeks later, I got my final paycheck in the mail. I've been expecting them to call, ask why I quit without notice, but they never did. Last month, I ran into another security guard who works there. Guy I used to overlap shifts with. I asked him if anything weird had ever happened on the upper floors. He got this look on his face, this careful, measured look. "You know," he said slowly, "we had 3 guards quit in the same month last year. All of them worked the midnight shift. All of them refused to say why." Then he changed the subject and wouldn't talk about it again. "I drive past the merchandise mart sometimes. That massive Art Deco building squatting over the river. And I think about all those corridors and showrooms and spaces between spaces. I think about that cup of coffee, still steaming. Someone made that coffee. Someone sat in that chair. And something is walking those halls at night, wearing faces that don't belong to it. I sleep with all the lights on now. And sometimes in the middle of the night, I'll catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror, and for just a second, I don't recognize the smile. Story 4. The meatpacking district near Ashland used to be this huge industrial area back in the day. Most of the buildings are abandoned now, waiting for developers to turn them into lofts or whatever. But there are still a few blocks that haven't been touched, places where the old buildings just sit there rotting. We went there on a dare, basically. My friend Jillian had heard about some photography students who'd gotten amazing shots in one of the old processing plants, and she wanted to try it. Andre and I tagged along because, I don't know, it was something to do on a Saturday night. This was October of last year. October 14th maybe, around there. We parked on a side street where the streetlights were out. The building Jillian wanted to get into was this massive brick structure, 4 or 5 stories tall, with most of the windows broken or boarded up. There was a chain-link fence around it, but someone had cut a hole in the back. "This is definitely trespassing," I said. I was the nervous one of the group, always had been. "Come on, Brett," Jillian said. "We'll be in and out in an hour. Get some photos, explore a bit, leave. Nobody cares about these buildings." Andre was already through the fence. He had this big flashlight he'd brought, one of those police-issue ones. Building's been abandoned for 20 years. If anyone was going to care, they would have bricked up the entrances by now. We got inside through a loading dock door that didn't close properly. The smell hit us immediately: mildew, rust, something organic and rotten underneath. Jillian had her camera out already, taking shots of the peeling paint and rusted equipment. The main floor was huge. High ceilings with metal rafters, old conveyor systems running along the walls, everything covered in this layer of grime and bird shit. There were puddles everywhere from rain getting in through the broken windows. Our footsteps echoed weirdly in the space. "This is perfect," Jillian said, snapping pictures. "Look at these textures." We explored the ground floor for maybe 20 minutes. Andre found some old paperwork in what used to be an office: invoices from 1987, employee schedules. I mostly just followed along, keeping an eye on the exits because I couldn't shake the feeling that we shouldn't be there. Then Jillian found the stairs to the second floor. "I want to see what's up there." The photographer guy said the upper floors had the best stuff. The stairs were metal and they rattled under our weight. One of the steps was missing entirely, just a gap with darkness underneath. We had to jump it. The second floor was more of the same: old machinery, broken windows, evidence of where homeless people had been camping at some point, but it was darker up here. The windows were smaller and more of them were boarded up. Andre's flashlight felt inadequate for the space. That's when we heard it, a voice, singing. It was coming from deeper in the building, echoing through the empty rooms. A woman's voice, singing something wordless, just melody. It was pretty in a way that made my skin crawl. "There's someone else here," Andre whispered. "We should have left. We absolutely should have turned around right then and walked out." But Jillian was already moving toward the sound, camera raised. Maybe it's another photographer or an artist using the space. The singing got louder as we moved through a series of smaller rooms. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere. The melody would get clear for a moment, then fade, then come back from a different direction. We entered a large room at the far end of the floor. This one had been used for refrigeration. You could still see the massive freezer doors along one wall, hanging open now. And in the center of the room, someone was standing with their back to us. A woman in a long dress. Dark hair hanging past her shoulders. Swaying slightly as she sang. "Hello," Jillian called out. The singing stopped. The woman didn't turn around. She just stopped moving, stopped singing, stood completely still. Andre raised his flashlight and pointed it at her. "Hey, we don't mean to bother you, we were just..." The woman's head turned. Not her body, just her head. It rotated on her neck in a smooth, continuous motion going way past the point where a human neck should stop. She turned until she was looking at us upside down, her face wrong in the flashlight beam. Her eyes were open too wide. Her mouth was smiling, but the smile was all wrong, pulling at angles that made her face look like a mask someone had drawn features on. "Run," I said. Or maybe Andre said it. Or Jillian. Someone said it and we all moved at once. We ran back through the rooms, stumbling over debris, Andre's flashlight beam bouncing crazily off the walls. Behind us, the singing started again, but now there were multiple voices. 3 or 4 of them harmonizing all around us. We hit the stairs and went down so fast I nearly fell. Jillian did fall, caught herself on the railing. Andre pulled her up and we kept going. We reached the ground floor and ran for the loading dock. Behind us, footsteps on the metal stairs, not running, walking. Multiple sets of footsteps, steady and measured. The singing was getting closer. We scrambled through the loading dock door and across the lot to the fence. I tore my jacket on the chain link getting through. We ran to Andre's car and he couldn't get the keys in the ignition at first. His hands were shaking so bad. The car started. We pulled away. I looked back at the building. There were figures in the broken windows, 3 of them, maybe 4, just standing there silhouetted against the darkness inside, watching us leave. We didn't talk about it at first, just drove in silence for maybe 10 minutes. Finally, Jillian said, "Did you see her face? Did you see how her head?" "Don't," Andre said. "I don't want to talk about it." But we had to talk about it eventually. We met for coffee 3 days later, all of us looking like we hadn't slept. Jillian had transferred all her photos to her laptop. She showed us. Most of them were just normal shots of the building. But in 3 of the photos, ones taken before we saw the woman, there were figures in the background. Blurry, hard to make out, but definitely human-shaped. In one photo, taken from the ground floor looking up at the second floor windows, you could see 5 faces looking down at us. We'd been watched the entire time. Jillian deleted all the photos after that. Andre moved the files to a flash drive first, just in case. He says he still has it but won't look at it. I don't know if I believe him. I drive past that area sometimes on my way to work. The building is still there, still abandoned. Sometimes I think I should report what happened, tell someone. But who would I tell? What would I say? Last I heard, the city approved development of that block. Construction's supposed to start next spring. Part of me wonders if the construction crews will find anything. Part of me hopes they burn the whole thing down. But late at night when I'm trying to sleep, I can still hear that singing. Multiple voices harmonizing. And I know that whatever those things were, they're still in there, waiting. Story 5. I inherited my grandfather's house in the Pullman district after he died. Walter Graves. He'd lived there for 43 years, bought it back in the 70s when you could still get places cheap in that neighborhood. I hadn't been inside the house since I was maybe 12 years old. My mother and grandfather had some falling out and we stopped visiting. But he left it to me in his will, and I needed a place to stay after my roommate situation fell apart, so I moved in. The house was exactly how I remembered it. Small 2-story brick workers' cottage, the kind they built 100 of back when Pullman was a company town. Narrow rooms, low ceilings, hardwood floors that creaked. My grandfather's furniture was still there, his books still on the shelves. The kitchen had a calendar from 2019 still hanging on the wall. I started there in late January. The heating worked mostly. I spent the first few days just sorting through my grandfather's things, deciding what to keep and what to donate. He'd been a meticulous person, kept receipts and documents going back decades. There were boxes of paperwork in the basement that I'd have to go through eventually. The first week was fine. I was working from home at that point, some tech support job I could do anywhere. So I'd spend my days at the kitchen table with my laptop, Then explore the neighborhood in the evenings. Pullman is strange, historic but forgotten, preserved but empty. You walk past these Victorian houses and old factory buildings and feel like you're walking through a museum after hours. The second week, I started noticing the sounds. It would happen late at night, always after midnight. I'd hear something moving inside the walls. Not mice, I know what mice sound like. This was bigger, heavier, like something was crawling through the spaces between the walls, moving from room to room. I told myself it was probably raccoons. Old houses settle, animals get in the attic, completely normal. I'd call an exterminator in the morning. But the sounds were too deliberate, too slow. It would start in one corner of the house and move methodically through the walls, always following the same path. Like something was searching for something. One night I was lying in bed. I was using my grandfather's old room on the second floor when I heard it right next to my head. Something on the other side of the wall, maybe 3 inches from where my pillow was, scratching. Long, slow scratches like fingers dragging down drywall. I turned on the lights and the sound stopped immediately. I got up and checked the wall. Solid. No holes, no gaps. I knocked on it. Hollow behind the drywall, but that was normal for an old house. I slept on the couch that night. The next day I went down to the basement to see if I could find where something might be getting in. The basement was unfinished concrete walls, exposed ceiling joists, that perpetual dampness old basements always have. My grandfather had used it mainly for storage. There were metal shelves stacked with boxes, an old water heater, a workbench covered in tools. I was checking behind the shelves when I found it. Someone had punched a hole in the concrete wall. Not recently, the edges were old, the concrete worn smooth. The hole was maybe a foot in diameter, and it led into darkness. When I shined my phone light into it, I couldn't see the back. It just went into the concrete, deeper than should be possible. There was a piece of plywood leaning against the wall next to the hole, like my grandfather had been meaning to cover it up but never did. I grabbed the plywood and wedged it over the hole, then stacked some boxes in front of it for good measure. Problem solved. Whatever was getting in would have to find another way now. That night, the sounds were worse. They started around 1 a.m. Something heavy moving through the walls, but now it sounded frantic, desperate. And there was another sound underneath the movement, a breathing sound, wet and labored. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, my phone in my hand, trying to decide if I should just leave, drive to a hotel, come back in the morning with an exterminator and a contractor and deal with this rationally. Then I heard something in the basement, footsteps, slow footsteps on concrete. I should have left. I should have walked out the front door and never looked back. But I'd spent 2 weeks convincing myself this was all explainable, and I needed it to be explainable. I needed this to be raccoons or plumbing or old house sounds. I went down the basement stairs. The lights were on. I always left them on because the basement was creepy in the dark. The shelves were still there, the boxes still stacked. But the plywood I'd put over the hole was on the floor now, lying flat like someone had carefully removed it. And there were muddy footprints leading from the hole to the stairs. Not mud, something darker. And the footprints were wrong, too long, the toes too spread out. Like someone walking on their toes, heel never touching the ground. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring at those prints, and I heard something behind me, breathing, right behind me. I turned around. It was crouched in the corner near the water heater, partially hidden in shadow. I could see its silhouette, too tall, too thin, limbs bent at angles that weren't right. Its head was tilted back, looking at the ceiling, and I could hear that wet breathing sound coming from somewhere on its body. Then its head tilted forward, and it looked at me. I don't remember climbing the stairs. I remember being in the basement, and then I was in the kitchen, gasping, slamming the basement door behind me. I grabbed my keys and my phone and ran out the front door. I drove to a 24-hour diner and sat there until sunrise, drinking coffee with my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the cup. When I went back the next morning, in full daylight, with a friend from work, the basement was empty. The hole was still there, but the plywood was back in place like I'd left it. No footprints. No signs that anything had been there. I hired contractors to fill in the hole with concrete. Told them I was worried about water damage. They did it in 2 days. But I still hear it sometimes. Late at night, something moving through the walls. Slower now, more careful, like it's learning the layout. I found something last week. I was going through my grandfather's paperwork and I found a letter, dated 1987. It was from the city's historical society. They were researching the old Pullman houses and wanted to know if my grandfather knew anything about the basement tunnels that used to connect some of the buildings. Basement tunnels. He'd written back saying his basement had no access to any tunnels, that he'd checked thoroughly and sealed everything. But he'd kept the letter, filed it carefully in a folder labeled House History. I think he was lying to them. I think he knew about the hole, about what was down there. I think that's why he lived alone for 43 years. Why my mother stopped bringing us to visit. Why the house felt so empty even when he was alive. Something lived in the walls with him, and now it lives in the walls with me. I should move. I know I should move. But I keep thinking about that hole filled with concrete now. About whether concrete is enough. About what happens if it finds another way in. Last night I heard scratching again. Not in the walls this time. Under my bed. Story 6. My friend Felix and I got lost near the Calumet River trying to find this bar his coworker had told him about. It was supposed to be in one of those industrial areas where they'd converted old warehouses into restaurants and breweries. We'd been driving around for maybe 30 minutes, our GPS taking us in circles, before we finally admitted we had no idea where we were. The area was all industrial parks and shipping facilities. Lots of chain-link fences and sodium lights. Not residential, not really anything. Felix pulled over in a parking lot so we could figure out where we'd gone wrong. I think we're south of the river, I said, checking my phone. We should head back up too. Shit, Felix said. I think we're out of gas. The gauge was on E. We'd been driving around so long we hadn't noticed. We both checked our phones. Mine had 2% battery. Felix's was dead. He'd been using it for navigation and killed it. Okay, I said, trying not to panic. We can walk. Find a gas station, get a can of gas, come back. We locked the car and started walking. It was February, cold but not unbearable, maybe 9 p.m. We followed the road back the way we'd come, looking for any sign of civilization. The industrial area went on forever, building after building, all dark, all closed. No cars passed us, no people, just streetlights and silence and the distant sound of the river. After maybe 20 minutes, Felix stopped walking. Did you hear that? I hadn't heard anything. What? Footsteps behind us. We both turned around. The road behind us was empty. Pools of orange light under the street lamps, darkness between them, nothing moving. You're paranoid, I said, but I was starting to feel it too. That awareness of being alone in a place that felt too empty. We kept walking, and then I heard it, footsteps. Steady, measured footsteps on pavement matching our pace. I turned around again, nothing there. Felix grabbed my arm. Lucia, I'm not imagining this. Someone is following us. We walked faster, the footsteps got faster, we stopped walking, the footsteps stopped. Okay, I said, fuck this, we run. We ran. I'd been wearing boots with a heel and I stumbled twice, but I kept going. Behind us, the footsteps ran too, and they were gaining on us. We turned a corner into an alley between two warehouses. Dead end. Chain-link fence at the back, no way through. Climb, Felix said. The fence was maybe 10 feet high with barbed wire at the top. We climbed anyway, cutting our hands on the wire. I tore my jacket getting over. We dropped down on the other side into another parking lot, this one full of shipping containers. We crouched behind a container trying to catch our breath. I checked my phone. 1%. No signal. And then we heard it on the other side of the fence. Something was climbing over. We could hear the chain link rattling, hear something moving across the barbed wire without slowing down. We ran again. Between the containers out into another street. Left, right, I don't remember, just running. Finally, we saw lights ahead. A gas station. A blessed, beautiful, fluorescent-lit gas station with a bored attendant inside. We burst through the door. The attendant looked up from his phone. "We need help," Felix said, gasping. "Someone's chasing us." The attendant looked past us at the empty parking lot. "Don't see nobody." We turned around. The street outside was empty. "They were right behind us," I said, but even I wasn't sure anymore. The attendant sold us a gas can and let us charge our phones while he filled it. We called an Uber to take us back to Felix's car. No way we were walking. When we got back to the car, we filled the tank and left. Neither of us said much on the drive home. But here's the thing that still bothers me. The next day, I found something in my jacket pocket. A small strip of paper, folded several times. I don't know how it got there. My jacket had been zipped up all night. I unfolded it. Someone had written on it in pencil, careful block letters. "You can't run past HALSTED." I checked the map later. We'd been running east when we found the gas station, and the gas station was on Halsted. Whatever was chasing us had stopped at that street, like there was a boundary it couldn't cross. I showed Felix the note. He went pale. "I found something too," he said. He showed me his phone. There was a photo in his camera roll he didn't remember taking. It was from that night, taken while we were running. A blurry shot of the pavement behind us. You could see a shadow in the picture. A long, distorted shadow that didn't match any of the streetlights. And at the top of the shadow, there was something that might have been a head. But the head was the wrong shape. Too narrow, too tall. We never went back to that area. Never tried to find that bar. Felix moved to Wisconsin for work 6 months later, but we still talk sometimes. Neither of us can explain the note. Neither of us wants to, because if something was chasing us that night and if it stopped at Halsted, that means it's still there, on the other side of that boundary, waiting. Story 7. Navy Pier is weird late at night. During the summer months, there are people there until midnight or later, tourists and couples walking the pier. But in winter, especially on weeknights, the place empties out by 10 p.m. The restaurants close, the Ferris wheel stops running, and it becomes this massive empty space jutting out into the lake. I worked maintenance there for exactly 2 months. Late shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was my job to clean up after the crowds left, check that everything was secure, report any damage. Easy work usually. I'd walk the pier with my cart of cleaning supplies, my keys jangling on my belt, my headphones in. My 4th week, something started to feel wrong. It began with the reflections. Navy Pier has windows everywhere, storefronts, restaurants, the Crystal Gardens. And late at night, when you're alone, you catch your reflection constantly. Usually I didn't think about it. Just me, my cart, my orange maintenance vest. But one night I was walking past the window of a closed restaurant and I saw myself in the glass, except I looked wrong. The reflection was smiling. I wasn't smiling. My face was neutral, tired from 4 hours of work. But in the reflection, my mouth was pulled into this wide grin. I stopped walking. The reflection stopped too, but the smile didn't fade. It just stayed there, stretched across my reflected face. I turned away and kept walking. Told myself I was exhausted, my eyes were playing tricks. That's all it was, but after that I started noticing more things. My reflection would move slightly out of sync. I'd turn my head and the reflection would take a half-second longer. I'd lift my arm and the reflection would complete the motion just slightly after I did. And the face was always wrong. Sometimes smiling, sometimes just empty. Like someone had erased all expression and left something blank behind. I tried not to look at windows after that. Kept my eyes down, focused on my work. But Navy Pier is full of reflective surfaces. Store windows, glass doors, polished metal columns, the Crystal Gardens walls. Avoiding them was impossible. 2 weeks in, I saw something worse. I was in the Crystal Gardens, this big indoor botanical space with glass walls looking out at the lake. It was around 2 a.m., dead quiet except for the heating system. I was emptying trash cans when I caught sight of my reflection in one of the glass walls. I was standing about 10 feet from the glass, but my reflection was closer, maybe 5 feet from the glass. Like it had walked toward the window while I stayed back. I stood completely still. My reflection stood still too, but it was in the wrong place. And then it tilted its head. I didn't move. It tilted its head like it was studying me. I backed away slowly. My reflection didn't move at all, just stood there, head tilted, watching me from inside the glass. I left the Crystal Gardens. I didn't finish cleaning that section. Went straight to the break room and sat there for an hour drinking coffee with my hands shaking. I should have quit then. I should have walked out and never come back, but I needed the job. Rent was due. I had bills. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Stress, lack of sleep, too much time alone. My last night there, I was in the terminal building near the east end of the pier. It was around 4 a.m. The building was completely empty, all the shops closed and dark. I was mopping the floor near the central corridor when I looked up and saw all the reflections. Every window, every glass door, every reflective surface. There was someone in all of them, not me, someone else. Someone wearing my maintenance uniform, my vest, holding my mop. But their face was pale and smooth, features barely defined, like a face drawn by someone who'd never seen a human before. And in every reflection, they were closer to the glass than I was, closer to getting out. In some of the windows, I could see their hands pressed against the inside of the glass. I dropped the mop. I walked toward the exit, not running, not letting myself run. I kept my eyes straight ahead, didn't look at any windows, didn't check any reflections. Behind me, I heard something, a soft tapping sound like fingernails on glass, getting louder, more insistent. I made it to the exit, pushed through the door into the cold air outside, looked back at the building. Every window was dark, empty. Just my own reflection looking back at me from the door I'd just come through, except my reflection wasn't moving. I was standing still and breathing hard, but the reflection was perfectly motionless. And it was smiling, that same too-wide smile. I got in my car and left. Sent my supervisor a text saying I quit, family emergency. Never went back for my last paycheck. 3 weeks later, I ran into another maintenance worker who worked Navy Pier. Guy named Ray, worked the day shift. I asked him if anyone strange had been hired to replace me. He gave me this odd look. You're the third person to quit the late shift this year. Same way two just stopped showing up. Management's having trouble filling the position. Did the others ever say why they quit? Ray shook his head. Nobody wants to talk about it. I told him about the reflections. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, you know that kid who drowned off the pier last year? Fell off one of the observation areas late at night. I hadn't heard about it. What about him? They never found the body. Search went on for 2 weeks. Coast Guard, divers, everything. Water was clear, weather was good. They should have found something. He looked at me carefully. His girlfriend said he'd been working late shift maintenance. Said he'd been acting strange the week before. Wouldn't look at mirrors. Covered the bathroom mirror at home with a towel. Ray didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. I avoid Navy Pier now. Drive the long way home if I have to, just to avoid seeing it. And I don't look at my reflection more than necessary. When I brush my teeth, I keep my eyes on the sink. Because sometimes late at night, I catch sight of myself in a darkened window or a turned-off TV screen. And I'm never alone in the reflection anymore. There's always someone standing behind me, someone wearing my face, someone with a smile that doesn't end, waiting. Story 8. Lower Wacker Drive has 3 levels, though most people only know about 2. The third level isn't on any official maps. It was part of a 1950s expansion project that got sealed off when they realized the ventilation wasn't adequate. But the entrances are still there if you know where to look. Grated doors that are supposed to be locked. Supposed to be. I'd been exploring Chicago's abandoned spaces for about a year when I found the way down. There's an access tunnel off Lower Wacker that connects to the sealed section. The grate had been pried open years ago and nobody had bothered to replace it. I squeezed through with my camera and flashlight. The sealed level was exactly what you'd expect: decades of darkness and neglect. The ceiling was lower than the other levels, and there was water damage everywhere. Old graffiti from the 70s, rusted cars that had been abandoned when they sealed it, piles of construction debris. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, showing fragments of this forgotten space. I was documenting everything with my camera. Empty storage rooms, old maintenance offices, a stretch of roadway that just ended in a concrete wall. I'd been down there for maybe an hour when I found the door. It was set into the wall at the end of a side tunnel. Heavy metal door, no markings. I tried the handle and it opened with a shriek of rusted hinges. Beyond the door was a room. Small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with a metal desk and chair. There were papers on the desk, yellowed and curled at the edges. A clipboard hanging on the wall, and covering every inch of the walls, scratched into the concrete, were words. The same words, repeated over and over and over. Don't let it follow you up. I stood there reading those words in my flashlight beam, my skin crawling. Someone had spent hours down here, scratching this warning into the walls. The scratches were deep, desperate. I took photos. Several of them. Then I backed out of the room and closed the door. That's when I heard the sound, something scraping on concrete. Rhythmic, steady, coming from deeper in the sealed section, from the darkness beyond my flashlight beam. I started walking back toward the access tunnel, not running, just walking quickly, professionally. Urban exploration rule number 1, don't panic. Whatever I'd heard was probably just the building settling, or water dripping, or rats. The scraping sound got closer. I walked faster. My flashlight beam bounced off the walls as I navigated back through the corridor. Behind me, the scraping continued, steady, methodical, following. I reached the main roadway of the sealed level, turned left toward the access tunnel. I could see the grated door ahead, maybe 50 feet away. The light from Lower Wacker streaming through. I looked back. Something was standing in the corridor I just left. It was tall, too tall. Its head was hunched down to avoid the ceiling, shoulders bent forward. In my flashlight beam, I could see it was pale. Skin or cloth, I couldn't tell. It was swaying slightly, that same rhythmic motion I'd heard, and it was scraping something on the ground, its foot. The toes were dragging on the concrete with every step. It started walking toward me. I ran. I hit the access tunnel at full speed, scrambling through the opening in the grate. My camera bag caught on the metal and I left it. Just kept moving. Up the ramp to Lower Wacker. Up the next ramp to Lower Wacker. Up to street level. I didn't stop until I was on Michigan Avenue with people around me, car horns honking, normal city noise. I stood there on the sidewalk gasping, my hands on my knees. When I checked my phone, 4 hours had passed. I'd thought I was down there for maybe 90 minutes. 4 hours. The battery was almost dead even though it had been fully charged. I had to go back for my camera bag. Told myself I had to. The camera alone was worth $800 plus all the photos I'd taken. I waited until the next afternoon. Brought a friend with me, someone else from the urban exploration community. Told him I'd dropped my bag and needed a second person for safety. Didn't tell him about what I'd seen. We went down together. Broad daylight above, though that doesn't mean much, 3 levels underground. We found my bag right where I'd left it, caught on the grate. The access tunnel beyond was empty. We shined our lights down the corridor, nothing there. But when we checked the grate, we found something I hadn't noticed before. Deep scratches on the metal bars. Fresh scratches, bright metal showing through the rust. Something had tried to get through. Something with fingers strong enough to gouge steel. We left. I never went back. I deleted most of the photos from that day, kept just 3. One of the sealed roadway, one of the abandoned cars, and one of that room with the warning scratched into the walls. I showed that last photo to someone I know who works for the city, asked if they knew anything about the sealed section of Lower Wacker. They got quiet. That level's off limits, they finally said. Has been since the 60s. They did seal it for ventilation issues, but that's not the whole story. What's the rest of it? They wouldn't tell me, just said, there's a reason those grates are supposed to be locked. You shouldn't have gone down there. A few months later, I heard about another urban explorer who'd gone missing. Last seen heading toward Lower Wacker with his camera. They found his car parked on the street level, camera bag in the trunk, no sign of him. The police searched the lower levels, found nothing. The case went cold. I still have that photo of the room. Sometimes late at night I look at it, reading those desperate words scratched into the concrete. I think about who wrote them. How long they were down there before they died, whether they died, whether they got out, and whether they followed the one rule they tried to warn us about. Last week I was walking past a grate on Lower Wacker, one of the ventilation grates that connects to the sealed level. I don't know why I stopped. Don't know why I looked down through the metal bars into the darkness below. But I swear I saw something move down there. Something pale, swaying slightly. And I could hear that sound, that rhythmic scraping on concrete. Coming closer to the grate, I don't walk on Lower Wacker anymore. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments which story unsettled you most, and share this with your friends who love a good scare. Until next time, stay safe out there.